What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. Got a special guest on today from the Philly area, Jeff Nadu. We're going to talk to him. He's got the Sit Down. He does a lot of good stuff over there on his channel. We'll talk about his channel. We're going to talk about Kabani Savage. We're going to talk about some other savages that were in Philadelphia, because he's from that area, and I think he can give us some good insight. So, Jeff, talk a little bit about you. Tell the people who you are, and let's get started.
It's always good to be on with you, Chad Marks. You're, I know a lot of people of your channel know that I interviewed you. I watch all your videos. You're one of the best out there, and I'm happy to be on your channel. Yeah, so I do a little bit of everything. I mean, I'm from the Philly area, as you said. I've never been to prison. I'm not a gangster. I'm not running the streets. I'm just someone that kind of, from an early age, enjoyed sports, first of all, and then I get into media, and then for me, it allowed me to get into other things that I wanted to get into. I always wanted to get into a show about crime, particularly the mafia, drug cartels, that sort of thing, and it really just took me an interesting way. I started a show. It really took off, and now the show is with Barstool Sports, and I'm very happy with what it's doing, and it's been able to allow me to get into other things. And I really just tell people stories, kind of like how you do. You do it a little different. You do it really from the prison perspective. But, I'm just someone that inundates myself with facts. I like to read. I like to research. And I like to go to the scene of the crime. And, from where I'm at, in the city that I'm in, there's a ton of very interesting, disgusting, and depraved people to get into. So it's not hard. But, like I said, I'm not someone that's been to prison. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp of the content and understand it. And I think people just like the fact that I'm detailed and get into things. So I'm a little different from where you are, but I think we all kind of have a good kind of role in this thing, and we all make it work.
So let's talk a little bit about, we'll get into some of the stuff on your show too, but let's talk a little bit about Kabani Savage, because I did a video about Kabani, and some people have wrote me, a couple people have threatened me on emails. Some people are upset, some people are mad. How old were you back then when all that stuff was going on with Kabani Savage?
Yeah, so that was I was a teenager, and I remember reading the newspaper when that was going on. I mean, Kabani Savage was just like anyone else, really. And then the firebombing stuff happens, the killing witnesses happens, and it was really reminiscent, I remember, of watching The Wire when I was a kid. There was a character, Marlo Stanfield, who was very similar to Kabani. I think, and I've talked about this before, Chad, on my channel. You mentioned Rayful Edmond to me before. You've talked about Rayful Edmond on your channel. And I look at someone like Rayful Edmond, and I compare him to someone like Kabani, okay, and the old school drug dealer versus the new school. Not that Rayful Edmond had morals, but he did. He had ethics, okay? When the Georgetown basketball coach told him to stay away from his players, he respected it and did it. Yeah. Someone like Kabani Savage was willing to kill anyone. He didn't care. It was what he wanted. He was all about revenge. He was all about just lighting the city on fire, and he didn't care who was in the way. And literally, he did that. And it was just a different type of drug dealer that I had really never come across. I've said before, I think Kabani Savage is the most dangerous person in the history of this state. I think he is that lethal. I think federal prisons were made for people like him. And again, it wasn't him just, he decided to make a bad decision and light a house on fire. No, he lit a house on fire. He killed witnesses. He just shot people in the middle of the street for no reason. The first murder Kabani Savage ever was a part of was a guy that bumped his car by accident. He gets out of the car, looks around and says, "Did anybody know this guy?" And he says, "No." Pulls a gun, shoots him in the head. Now, why he did that, we have no idea, but that's the kind of guy he was. He was a lethal, depraved, and just disgusting person.
And because you're a sports fan, he also killed, a professional fighter.
He did. He was a fighter himself, Kabani. He had fought down in Atlantic City. He was a boxer. That was when he was a normal human being. And I don't know what happened to Kabani Savage, really, because he became, I don't know what sight of life he lost. I mean, he actually was a pretty smart guy, if you know much about him. When he became a drug dealer, Chad, I don't know if you're familiar with some of his practices and how he became who he was, but this is a guy that would give drugs out for free for a week. It was something that in Philadelphia they call pumping the corner. He would go to a corner. And Ethan Butler, where all this stuff happened, is a notorious drug corner. It is probably the most profitable drug block pre-Kensington. If you're familiar with Kensington,
yeah.
Ethan Butler is where you go to cop. Everybody knows that. And the guy he killed, Tibius Flowers, was a boxer, as you said. Ethan Butler was his corner. And a lot of people realize that when he killed that Kenneth Lasseter guy, when he pulled the gun out and killed him for the first time, that was on Ethan Butler. And a lot of people believe that he did that so the cops would be around. You couldn't sell drugs in a corner. And he starts moving in on some of the close corners, Knife and Pike, Knife and Bonago, all these corners. And he starts muscling in. Before you know it, Tib Flowers decides he's going to cooperate against Cabani. Cabani gets wind of it and eventually kills him. But yeah, I mean, he was smart enough to realize you have to eliminate the competition. You have to be willing to eliminate the competition. And that's how you become a boss. I always liken it, Chad. A friend of mine read a book about how to become a mafia boss. What are the things you have to do to become a mafia boss? And one of them is you have to be willing to kill your competition. Cabani realized that. He was a smart guy in the end. He was just a depraved guy who lost sight of life when he started killing people that had nothing to do with him.
You know, the thing is this, right? So Tibbs, he was a drug dealer. He had the corner over there, but he was also a fighter. Do you think Tibbs decided, hey, I'm going to cooperate against Cabani Savage to get rid of him? This is my way of getting rid of him where I don't have to kill him. I don't want to kill him, so I'll get rid of him this way. Do you think that's...
Well, they actually hated each other. There was a long-standing beef between them. They didn't like each other. And I think that goes all the way back to when they were younger. See, I think the problem that Cabani Savage had was he had been in the life really his whole life. His father, Joe Savage, was a drug dealer as well. And if you're familiar with the guy Gerald Thomas, for a while Cabani's kind of connect.
Yeah.
Bobby Thomas is a legendary drug dealer in Philadelphia. He goes all the way back to the Black Mafia. He has been a drug trafficker for years. And when Joe Savage died, Cabani, I think that's what came over him. He had no father anymore. He believed that, you know what, I could live a straight life and be normal, but that's not really in me. My dad wasn't like that. I'm not going to be like that. I need to take over my family. I need to provide for them. He gets into the game, and he eventually starts, being the connect for Bubby Thomas. He becomes so big. But I think his life was always going to be what it was, and he didn't like Tib Flowers, and they kind of jockeyed back and forth. He wanted to take over Tib's corner. Tib says, you know what, F this guy. I'm just going to cooperate against him. And yeah, maybe in a way, we can get him out of the way and I can get back to business. But he was messing with a different type of dude when it came to Cabani.
You know, the video that I just did, I had read in the beginning. I started the video with that Cabani Savage, letter, what he had wrote. And then I ended it that way where he said, if I don't do this, then my name ain't shit. My father's name wasn't shit. And, he's just like, he has to at some point realize, like, this is over with, man. Like, you're done. First you get 30 years, then they charge you. They're like, look, this is a death penalty case. We're gonna put you to sleep. We're gonna give you till the sun burns out. So at some point, do you think he's ever thought sitting in that ADX cell like this is it, it's over?
Hey, I'm fascinated by that because I've often wondered, does he have any sort of remorse? Because during his trial, he had zero remorse. I mean, in fact, I'm sure you've read the transcripts. I mean, they bugged his cell, and he was saying, some really disgusting things. I mean, Chad, the crazy thing about Cabani is, like, he's probably the closest thing I've seen to, like, cartel people, which they're the most depraved people out there. They'll kill anybody. He wanted to kill the children of witnesses. He even talked about it. He said he had dreams of beating up the children of these people and lighting them on fire. Do I think he has remorse at this point? No, I don't believe so. I'm curious about it. It's been about 10 years now he's been sitting there. I mean, as you know, ADX is the worst. He has no sort of... And I think the problem that he has as well is due to his behavior at the federal system in Philadelphia, he'll never have any movement again, really. He's conducted to a little cell, and I don't know. I've always wondered about it. I'd love to speak to him about it. But no, if I feel like I know him the way I do. Remember as well, his daughter was killed, not over his behavior, but he lost his daughter to the streets.
And she was only, I think she was 7 or 9 years old?
Yeah, she was a young child. And she actually, she lived in a city very close to where I live now, which is a dangerous city as well. But I think, Chad, what I've realized about all these people that we talk about is, whether the mafia members or whoever, I think they take kind of an ode, if you will, when they're kids to realize when I get into what I'm getting into, there's one, I'm going to go out one way in a box, and I'm okay with it, however it happens. This is my life. This is what I'm married to. I have nothing else. And I think that's who Kobani is. He's a stone cold gangster who, just made that decision. But then he also got his sister. His sister was probably as bad as him. I mean, Kadada, she was. I mean, I remember, Chad, I don't know if you got this from the report, but when the two individuals that lit the house on fire, the guy Lamont Lewis, who was his hitman Poppy Eye, and then the other guy Robert Merritt, when he called Kadada to say that it was done, Robert Merritt and Lamont were both visibly annoyed with the fact that they didn't tell him that kids were in the home.
Yeah.
He said, "You didn't tell us there were kids in here." She just responds with, "F them." That's all she said.
Oh no, she was definitely vicious. And the Popeye kid, he was, I think that was one of the motivating factors why he eventually cooperates.
Well, and he still got 40 years. Think about that.
Yeah.
I mean that shows how serious this case was. But yeah, I think he probably wasn't the same as Kobani. He realized, I'm not going to go to prison for someone like Kobani Savage. I'm surprised none of the other individuals cooperated. Whether it was Merritt or Stephen Northington or any of the people. But the big problem that Kobani had was Twin Coleman. And they actually, it's funny, they actually mentioned Twin Coleman early in the career of Kobani. He starts hanging around the group, and Kobani mentions at one point that you need to get him in on a murder because we think he's soft. He basically says that. He's soft. He ain't like us. His blood doesn't flow like us. We need him on something. So what they do is, Kobani just says, there's a guy they need to kill, Tyrone Tolliver, who's very close to Twin Coleman. They killed Tolliver in front of Coleman, so he's involved. And I think that's when he realized, this ain't what I want. I don't want to be a part of this. I'm not built like these guys. And he ended up being the guy that really kind of set this in motion. I don't think any of these people realized that this guy would be willing to do what he ended up doing. And you look at his mother, Marcella Coleman. I mean, she was told to leave Philadelphia. And she said, I don't want to leave. This is where I live. This is my house. This is my home. And I don't think anyone believed he'd be that callous and depraved, but he was.
He was definitely, and he still is probably, definitely a vicious dude, man. I mean, I do a lot of legal stuff. I'm an advocate. I help a lot of people. But, the contrast, let's say, like the contrast with him and Larry Hoover, right? Larry Hoover's trying to get out of prison. He's got a compassionate release motion in. I believe Larry Hoover's going to get out of the feds. I'm hopeful that, it works out for him on the state level where maybe he can get a pardon over there. But when you look at the two different people, I mean, Larry Hoover went to prison and educated himself. He's in the ADX just like Kobani's in there. But, he changed his life. I believe that man changed his life. He's been in there for over 25 years. And, as far as Kobani goes, I mean, the stuff that he was saying, the stuff that he was doing, I think it was beyond being a drug dealer. I think he was just maybe a psychopath. Intelligent dude. And a lot of times big drug dealers are intelligent dudes, right? They're smart. They understand the game. They make decisions. Unfortunately, in that game, they make decisions where they have to be willing, like you said, to kill their competition. So, he was an intelligent dude, but at the end of the day, he was also a dumb dude. Like you said, they tapped his, they went in the FDC Philly for people that don't believe this happens. They actually put, recorders in there. What did they do? Move everybody out of the block that day, tell them there was a movie, a concert, and went in there and put all that stuff in without anyone knowing? And this dude was just saying vicious things. He'd call people.
I don't think, if you ask me, I don't think he cared at all. I mean, he talked very openly about not only killing witnesses, he talked about killing the families of guards that he didn't like, supervisors. I mean, I don't think he cared. Now, he is 47 years old now. When this was all going on, he was in his early 30s. He was a brash, kid. Has maybe that brought over on him something? I don't know. But I don't think he cared ultimately about that. I think he would have vocally talked regardless of whether there were cameras or listening devices or whatever. And what's really interesting about this is you're right. He could have changed his life a little bit. Maybe try to show the federal prison system that, hey, even though I'm not getting out, I'm going to try to make a different life for myself and move on and do something else like a Larry Hoover or like someone else. But you're right, he hasn't. It's funny. One of his co-defendants, an individual, Dawood Bey, who
Yeah.
is listed in the conversations, he was there when Kabani was saying all this stuff. He was a drug dealer. He has changed his life considerably. He is out now, and he is, a vocalist in the streets for Safe Streets, and he's doing all sorts of stuff in Philadelphia. You don't have to be the person you were when you were 25 or 30 years old. But again, when you make your decision to go into this life, there is no other way. This is who I am. It's like John Gotti. When John Gotti went away, John Gotti didn't become some new guy. John Gotti was who he was. He was never going to waver on that. And I think that's the difference between people like Kabani Savage and John Gotti, between people like so-and-so. He's not going to play a character to get out of prison. This is his end, and that's how it's going to be.
Do you think Kabani was the most savage, person that Philadelphia, maybe some of the United States has ever seen? But I mean, we'll stay in Philly. Do you think he's one of the most dangerous dudes they've ever seen there?
Well, I remember in your video you said you mentioned his name, and anytime you mention his name, people go, "Wow, what a name!" And it's true. It's really the essence of a name. He really was a savage. Yes, I think he's the most. I think probably outside of the Philadelphia Black Mafia, who were depraved, if not more depraved. I mean, they killed little babies. I would say Kabani's number one for sure. And this is a dangerous state. There were a lot of dangerous people here. As far as drug dealers, I mean, I think outside of probably the cartel in this country, I would say he's the most dangerous drug dealer I've ever looked into. A lot of like I mentioned Rayful Edmonds, Griselda Blanco was pretty depraved out of Miami. But yeah, I would say Kabani in this state, surely. But the Black Mafia was bad too. And they were about 30 years before this guy. They were actually it's a lot of the guys that I mentioned, Dawood Bey, Kabani, a lot of their relatives were at one point part of the Black Mafia, and they had a stranglehold over the black community of West Philly, North Philly, South Philly for several decades.
The Black Mafia family, right? Let's talk a little bit about them.
Well, let me say one thing. There are two different groups. The Philadelphia Black Mafia is just the Black Mafia. The Black Mafia family would have been your Big Meech. They were two different groups, which is interesting, right?
Well, let me stop you for a second, Jeff, because the original Black Mafia was started in Missouri, and it was started by a white dude, and I actually interviewed him on my channel. He spent about 40 years in federal prison. He's an old man now. He's doing law work. He finally got out on compassionate release. But I understand what you're saying as far as Big Meech and stuff like that. But let's talk about the Philadelphia Black Mafia family.
Yeah, so the Philadelphia Black Mafia, I've actually said, Chad, I think it's one of the tentacles in why Philadelphia is so bad nowadays. It goes way back to the 60s. The Black Mafia was started through the Nation of Islam. Yeah. In Philadelphia, a lot of people aren't aware of this. It's one of the biggest Muslim populations in America. A lot of the black neighborhoods are Muslim. And back in the day, even Malcolm X was in the Nation. The Nation was looked at as this. It was ultimately like a black separatist movement. It was kind of a revival of the black community. Civil rights we're moving on. We're trying to lift ourselves up. And it was a power group. It was really an embodiment of creating something in the black community, black-owned businesses. We have our thing. We're going to create schools and all this sort of thing. And the Nation of Islam initially was a really good movement, something that worked in the black community. And then it got to this point where there started to be a tinge of crime that was going on underneath. And you started to find these groups that were figuring themselves out, particularly in Philadelphia, through the Nation, right? There was this mosque up in Philadelphia, up in North Philly, and it was led by this guy, Jeremiah Shabazz. Jeremiah Shabazz was a part of the Nation. He was the leader of the Philadelphia Nation of Islam. He had this group that was carrying out crime in the black neighborhoods, whether it was numbers, extortion, whatever. They were almost a mafia, except in the black community. They had a stranglehold on the entire black community. And they used the Nation kind of as a front, right? They were doing all this stuff. And killing people, selling drugs. They were, tons of drugs were coming into the community because of them. And they used it through the power of religion. Who's going to kick in a mosque for? But they became this huge group, and before you know it, they're the main drug suppliers in Philadelphia, and they are killing people, and they're doing things on behalf of the Nation of Islam. And I will quickly mention, Chad, they were also doing kind of the dirty work, right? So if someone spoke out or said something or whatever, and you can look into this, there was a rival group in Washington, D.C., called the Hanafi Muslims. And the Hanafi Muslims actually converted Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to become a Muslim. This is something, they were a very powerful group. They were led by a guy, and him and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who ran the Nation of Islam, they got into a beef at some point. He was talking very openly about Elijah Muhammad. And look, in the nation, you don't talk negatively about Elijah Muhammad. They look at him as like a prophet. So this guy that ran the Hanafis, he starts talking out of turn that he's gay and all this sort of thing through letters and stuff. And the individuals that ran the Black Mafia decided that they were going to go kill this guy. Hamas Abdul Khalis, his name was. So they set up a hit party. There were two guys that led the nation here, Sam Christian and Ron Harvey. If there's anyone more dangerous than Kabani, it is Ron Harvey. Ron Harvey is a notorious name. So they lead a hit group down in D.C. They storm this compound that the Hanafis were in. And they would find out that Hamas Abdul Khalis was not there that day. However, there were a ton of women and children in the building. They go in, light everybody up in the home, and they walk into a bathroom, and there are two little children in the bathroom, one of which was a 9-month-old baby. Ron Harvey, and I don't mean to get graphic. I'm not going to get graphic as to what he does, but he kills the baby, drowns it. And the investigators talked about when they walked into the scene, they thought it was a doll, and they realized it was a baby. And Ron Harvey talked about after the fact why he killed the baby. And he basically said that, I had to kill the baby because he was an offspring of the man that was talking. So he had to go. But they were just very dangerous people. And they, for a while, were able to rule the black community. And today, you still see tentacles of it because they ended up creating a junior black mafia that followed the black mafia. And I'm not going to get in because I don't want to bore your listeners, but it is a long history of the black community being owned basically by them.
I read a bunch of that stuff, and I'm familiar with a lot of them and Harvey and the crimes. And some people were mad at me because they said, I said that Kabani was Philly's most savage person, right? And people were like, yeah, but what about the Philadelphia Black Mafia family? So I said, you know what? Maybe I should do a video on that. And I don't want people to, get mad and say, man, what are these two white dudes doing talking about, black stuff and African Americans and Philadelphia. But, that's not what it's about, right? And I've told people this 1,000 times. I help more black people get out of prison, right? I've helped more black people learn to read and write in prison through my GED classes. One of my best friends, if not my best friend, is Cedric Dean, doing big things in Charlotte, North Carolina. He ran for mayor up there. He's getting people down there to vote. He's African American, spent 25 years of his life in prison. So this isn't about Chad and Jeff. This is about bringing the story, telling people what happened. And also it's about uplifting people, trying to bring change. That's what the message is. The message isn't like, this guy's the most savage guy, but at the end, really the message is, this isn't the life that you want to live. Is it really worth 4 or 5 years of your life of selling dope, selling drugs, getting money, driving nice cars, eating good food, and then you end up with the death penalty and you're sitting in a cell the size of your bathroom? That's what it's about. And that's what I want people to understand.
Well, there's a rapper in Philadelphia that said one time in one of his raps, he talked about a couple years worth of balling ain't worth a dub in the feds, and that's the truth. I hear it all the time. You're not Italian. Why do you talk about the mafia? Or you're not black. Why are you talking about black crime? Listen again. History is history. Okay, we can tell it or we can not tell it, and sit on our hands. Okay, this is history. These are people that are depraved people that need to be discussed, and we need to ask ourselves why the powers that be. It's interesting, Chad, because whether we talk about the Black Mafia, whether we talk about Kabani Savage, there's a guy you should look into, Shamsuddin Ali. Shamsuddin Ali was a Black Mafia hitman back in the day. Ask yourself this, and this is something that affects our whole life. Why is Shamsuddin Ali a hitman? He gets out of prison, right? Changes his name. Guess what he does today and what he did during the reign of Kobani Savage 20 years later? He became a member of the city government. This is a hitman at one point. Okay, how does he become a hitman? So when people want to say, why are you talking about this stuff? Because it affects our lives. That's why. These people end up getting into politics. They may be trying to change their life. And I'm not saying you shouldn't change your life, but Shamsuddin Ali, if you look into the Kobani Savage trial, eventually was doing things that he shouldn't be doing and ran into problems. But this is history. People can pretend it didn't happen, but it did. I still read stuff every day on the video I did on the Black Mafia chat where people from the Nation of Islam discuss, why are you talking about this? This isn't stuff that happened. We can sit on our hands and pretend it didn't happen, but it did happen. And this is stuff we need to hear about. It's fascinating and it's interesting, and I don't discriminate. I talk about crime in general. That's how it goes.
So, we'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you've done on your channel, right? I know that you interviewed the guy that actually was my lawyer, helped me get out of prison. I had a 40-year federal mandatory minimum. John Gleeson. You ended up interviewing John Gleeson, and just a little history for the people that are listening. John Gleeson was a prosecutor. He is the guy that prosecuted John Gotti. Eventually, he becomes a federal judge. He's a federal judge for 22 years, 23 years. He steps down from the bench, and he starts, he's a lawyer, obviously, and he does a bunch of stuff, but he's been helping a lot of people get out of prison that have stacked 924C charges, and that was kind of what his focus was, where, mostly young African-American men were sentenced for, gun charges, 5 years, 25, 25, 25, and they just stack them on until they give you 200 years, and then you're never getting out. So John Gleeson stepped in, and he's been doing those cases pro bono, for free. What was it like to have John Gleeson on your channel?
Well, it was pretty amazing because, I know what it went into getting John Gotti, right? What that went into. Because remember, John Gotti beat the rap multiple times. This is the most powerful gangster in America at the time. And, to find someone that I could kind of speak to about what went into, bringing that case in, getting Gravano to flip. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that they bugged an apartment that John Gotti used to do business in. And, what went into that? What was it like when you found that information out? He told me the story about the day that the FBI agent contacted him and said, we got a bug in the apartment above the Ravenite. And he talked about some of the feelings he had. He told me a story about when they were in court when, Gleeson would walk in every day and he'd sit down and they'd walk John Gotti in his suit and his hair coiffed, and he'd look over at Gleeson and go, something along the lines of, I'm gonna fuck your mother, that sort of thing. Just, he would say things to him. It was fascinating, man. Because he hasn't really talked much, and it was just interesting to kind of bend his mind on things and learn what went into it. He was a fascinating individual, man. And then you told me about your relationship with him and how you knew him at one point, and he's done a lot of good work, and I'm happy to see that he's going to make some money off the book because he's done a great job of it.
Yeah, he'll make some money off the book, but I think he's got plenty of money because he actually wrote the Second Circuit Handbook, right? And
he told me about that. Yeah.
That's like if you want that book, it's like $700 for one book, bro.
Well, he told me, Chad. I told him, I said, "Can I call you an author now?" He goes, "Well, I've written other books too. They're not as interesting as this one." But I said, "Oh, really? What?" And he told me, and I said, "Oh yeah, they're just legal books."
I'm from Rochester, right? So when he came up to court, him and a team, and we went back and forth to court a few times, I realized what a real lawyer was like. I saw what a real criminal defense lawyer is, what a real criminal defense team is. I mean, I did legal work in prison, and I'm not being arrogant, but I was one of the best jailhouse lawyers in the whole federal prison system. So, I deal with lawyers. I've talked to lawyers. I've had a couple lawyers there in my case. And when I seen what John Gleeson and Marissa Taney and Elizabeth Costello were, I said, these are what lawyers are, man. And, they kind of were like, they didn't say it directly, but they kind of gave the insinuation of where I was from. They're like, this is like hillbilly town. Or really, it's not, but to them it is because they're from New York City, right? So, seeing them, they were real lawyers, man, and that's what a real lawyer was. He came in there, and honestly, man, he saved my life, and I'm grateful that he came in to help me and did what he did.
You realize if you're ever in, and I noticed this by talking to someone like him. You know, I've seen in Philly, there's some big time lawyers, man. And when you, God forbid, are ever in a case, right, a criminal case, those are the people, and that's why they charge so much. They're the people that are literally going to give you your life back, right? They're gonna, you'll tell you the sky's blue, and they're gonna tell you it ain't, and I'm gonna prove why it's not. Even though you're looking at it and it's blue, they're gonna figure out a way to tell you it ain't blue. Yeah, they could sell, you know.
This is the thing. A lot of lawyers, right? And I hate to say it like this, but you know, a lot of people are just run-of-the-mill cases, man. They walk you through. This is what they say. This is what the guidelines. See you later. These people actually come in and they fight. That's why they get paid. A lot of people don't understand what it costs to go into a case, to fight a case, to, you know, there's a lot involved. So, you know, if you're paying a guy, you know, pennies, they're really not fighting for you. They're really not, because there is a lot of work that goes into it.
I think you're someone that, why I think you're so important to youth and to this YouTube thing is you have proved beyond a reasonable doubt, if you will, that you don't need tons of money, right? You just need, and I've always told people like this. People say to me, how do you do this and that on YouTube? And I say, well, I sit here and I educate myself. With
100%.
Sports, for instance. I went from no followers at one point to working for the biggest media company really in the country right now. And a lot of it has to do with just educating yourself. There are so many young people that do not educate themselves on how life works and how things work. And they realize sometimes, you watch these shows like The First 48, and I just squirm in my chair thinking, these people, shut up. Just sit there and don't say nothing. Educate yourself on what you did and what you didn't do and what you can and can't do. There's so many people, like you said, that they look at it and say, wow, this is going to cost a lot, and they're willing to give me this if I just say that. It's your life. What does it cost? What does your life cost, right? And you did it kind of in a way where it didn't cost you anything. You just educated yourself. A lot of people don't do that, and I think that's one of the biggest problems a lot of young people have. They don't educate themselves about it.
I mean, you got nothing to do and all day to do it when you're in there. You can watch TV, you can watch sports, you can play sports, you know, a few times a day, play basketball all day, or you can educate yourself, and that's what I did. I mean, of course, I played sports. I'm a really good basketball player too, for people that don't know. But
I believe it.
Anyway, I got a handle. Can't shoot that well, but I got a handle out of this world, and I can take it to the hole. But anyway, you know, I did. I educated myself. That's what was important. But I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, a kind of a connection to Gleeson. So you end up interviewing Sammy The Bull Gravano, right, on your channel. Yeah. I mean, what was it like to interview that guy, being that, you know, you had interviewed Gleeson, and I guess Gleeson was the guy that pretty much, you know, offered the deal to Sammy because he wanted to get John Gotti. He wanted to get that conviction. What was it like interviewing Sammy?
So I don't really think I've talked about this, but people don't understand how easy it truly was. I told him and his people, like, he runs a good ship over there. His company that he has people that work for him, and I literally just sent an email. I said, hey, this is my channel, this is what I do. She said, oh yeah, we know who you are. You know, and they even brought up the fact that I've talked a little negatively about Sammy in the past, and he said, well, we're willing to do it anyway, and you know, we'll give you a call the night before and we'll do it. So it's funny. I had a phone call the night before. It was an Arizona number. I got the call, and woman gets on the phone. She says, Jeff, this is so and so. Here's Sammy. Hey, how you doing? You know, and I answer the phone, and I'm like, wow, you know, this is Sammy Gravano I'm talking to there. And whether I like or dislike Sammy, it is almost like talking to someone that, you know, like famous, right? It's like, wow, this is Sammy Gravano, you know, and he's just like, hey, you can ask me whatever you want, ask me now, and I have all these questions, but it was fascinating. He was a lot nicer than I thought he would be. I thought, you know, kind of some of these gangsters, you'd think, he'll be mean or just kind of standoffish, but he was very open. He was very willing to talk. There were some things that I'd like to ask him that I didn't get a chance to, but it almost just was like putting you back in the, wow, you were around John Gotti every day. You were a part of this and that, and it was fascinating, man. It was an interview that I'll never forget.
Let me ask you this, and maybe I shouldn't put you on the spot, though, but
I love being put on the spot. Do it.
Do you know, because we talk about Kabani Savage and how he did the things that he did without remorse, and that's why I want to bring this back to Sammy the Bull Gravano. Do you think he should have gotten out of prison, given all the things that he had done?
No. No, absolutely not. I think, and that's, I think, the problem that I think a lot of people have with people that cooperate, right? My whole thing is, listen, it really comes down to one thing, Chad. They don't want to go to prison. It's pretty simple. You can say this person did that, and he was going to do this, and he was going to do that. If you become a criminal at that level, there is one way out. You die in prison, or you die in the streets. There's two ways out. You make, and Sammy Gravano knows this, and anyone that did this knows this. In 1970, whatever it was, when Sammy Gravano took that saint in his hand and said, "I will die like this saint and burn in hell if I betray my friends," he violated a code that he decided to take. Sammy Gravano had no problem killing his friends to make money. He had no problem killing his brother-in-law. Think about that. He killed a child, a teenager. No problem doing that. He's part of the life. He took the money that he made from it. And then when the going got tough and the end came, he blamed everybody else for his problem. No, I don't believe he should be out of prison. He's a seemingly changed man, and I hope he lives his life in anonymity, and it seems like he will. I think he has a lot of demons. I surely think that. And I think he battles with them every day. Do I have any sympathy? No, because in the end, Chad, he made those decisions, right? And you look at someone like yourself. You had a particularly bad situation. You did this, did that. You shouldn't have got what you got. He did
it's not.
Real quick, he did everything he did. Got a sweetheart deal. The government said, "We're willing to forgive you, an individual that killed tens of people, because we hate this guy more. And if you tell us about him, we'll let you out." He gets out, Chad. Goes to Arizona and starts selling narcotics. Okay? Now, whatever happened there is regardless. He should have crossed the street the right way. I don't care what happened. He got a sweetheart deal. Goes to prison again. Now he gets out and he's good and everything's gravy. But no, I think his crimes are unforgivable.
Well, I definitely appreciate you. I appreciate your insight. One thing I can say about you, just talking to you right now about Kabani Savage, like, it took me a couple days of research. Like, I read a lot of stuff. I actually quoted, the conversations that they had. You did your research, and obviously you know what you're talking about. So I respect that. There's a lot of work that you can just throw a 10-minute YouTube, video together, a 15-minute YouTube video together, and maybe it don't have the substance, it don't have the bang. But when you put a really good video together, it takes time, and a lot of people don't understand that.
It definitely does.
And I respect your research, and you do a good job.
Thank you. And I love yours as well. I mean, I think you're, like I said, I think you're one of the great channels out there. There's a lot of bad content out there. There's a lot of poor content out there. But I think, like you said, educate yourself, trying to put some passion into the video. And look, I get, the one thing I'll say is I'm not friends with any of these people, okay? I like to tell a true story. These are people that we're dealing with that are not Boy Scouts. These are people that are depraved, awful people that have made decisions that affect tens and 20s and 30s and 50s of lives. And, the history is sad and messed up. And I think we have to tell it. But thank you. I appreciate it. Coming from you, that means a lot. And your channel is, like I said, one of the best out there. And I'm happy to be on it.
Well, thank you. Before we get ready to go, is there anything you want to say?
No. I would say keep supporting Chad Marks, man, because, he has a story that is unlike very few, right? You've lived things that I'll never live, God forbid, and I hope I never have to live. And I'm glad you're sharing them because, I think you offer something that I can't offer, right? I talk about sports. I've never played them. I can offer my opinion, but I've never played them. You've actually been a part of this stuff, and there's a really interesting look that you can give that maybe I can't. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're doing this. And I thank you for having me. I love just talking about this stuff. I don't need to plug anything.
Well, I appreciate you. Your channel, The Sit Down. I'll put up the link so people can go check you out. I want people to go check out that interview with Gleeson. Maybe after this video, I'm going to share it in my community page as well so people can go check that out. But again,
by the way, he was also he was super cool, man. His people contacted us and said, "Hey, we'd like to do it." So and so. He was a cool guy, man. Just real down to earth. He's another guy. A lot of people don't like John, but he did what he had to do. These gangsters, they didn't like him, but he did his job, and that was how it had to go. And he's kind of an inspiration to me. So I appreciate what he gave.
Very professional. But again, man, listen, I appreciate you. I'm going to close the show. Tell people if they like it, you already know. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. With respect, Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.